I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America and Pod Save the World and the former National Security Council spokesman for President Obama, Tommy Vietor. Tommy, thanks for joining.
Great to be here.
So right now we are in the midst, obviously, of a total economic collapse. We just ran an entire campaign where Republicans were running around with their hair on fire over the fact that eggs were $1 more expensive than they had been. How successful do you think they're going to be at getting away with tamping down the massive cataclysmic economic losses that we're seeing right now, given what we know about how they were presenting themselves during the campaign?
That's what's so baffling about this, Brian. Even if Trump's policies are successful and he brings back manufacturing to the United States, prices of goods are going to go up. Right. That is how this works. He will either bring in a lot of tariff money from products coming in overseas and, I don't know, I guess use that to offset a tax cut for Elon Musk and the richest people in the country, or everyone's goods are going to go up in price.
Do you think that the Republicans are going to be successful at this new Fox News tack of claiming that this is just some temporary pain that we have to endure if we want to really be patriots in this country?
Yeah, Brian, I was watching Fox the other day. It was this Will Cain segment, and he was like, sure, stocks are down, but let's talk about what down means. And then he zoomed out the chart to a year, and he's like, if you look from a year or 5-year chart.
I think we have this clip. Let's take a look.
The market today down. S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow down. Tech stocks absolutely hammered down 10% on the NASDAQ. It does deserve some context. What do we mean by down? Take a look at this 12-month chart of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We have returned to the average of roughly October, down from the December highs of the election of Donald Trump and down from the January highs of the first month of his second term at the presidency. We've essentially returned to the place that we were a few months before Donald Trump.
Like, he just came away looking like Bill Clinton in the 90s, equivocating on the word is. I mean, I just don't think this is going to play with anybody.
I love this new tack of Republicans zooming out on the x-axis.
Yeah.
I saw one Republican on Twitter, I'll put this right here on the screen, where they said, well, if you actually look from 2021 to 2025, things don't look too bad. It's basically her saying that if you take a long look at how Biden actually propped up the economy for the last 5 years, then things don't look too bad in the long run.
It's incredible. These people have no self-awareness. And look, there's a bunch of seniors who are going to retire soon who need their 401ks.
Right.
They need this money. They don't have time. They don't have a decade to wait around for the S&P 500 to come back to where it was. Like, they're going to get hurt.
And so I'm curious what you think in terms of political gravity here, because we've obviously, seen how potent the issue of the economy could be. Trump himself admitted in the aftermath of the election that one of the two issues that he was able to win on was the economy. That was the result of the worldwide phenomenon of global inflation in the aftermath of COVID. The other one was immigration. But as far as inflation was concerned, look, there's no doubting how potent these major economic issues are on the American public. And so is there a way for them to kind of skate by here? Or do you think that political gravity as it relates to the economy is just too strong?
I mean, I think if he continues this course with these tariffs, in the long term, it's going to increase inflation. It just is. And it will likely create a series of headlines like we saw this week where the S&P is down 2%, 3%, 4%. And people are going to be looking at their 401ks and wondering where all their retirement savings went. Like, these stories break through.
Yeah.
Like people, when the stock market is down 5%, that it leads every newscast. That is on social media. You can't escape that if you're the president of the United States. You can't just blame Joe Biden for that. Like, that's not going to fly.
Au contraire.
You could try. You could try. You're right.
Well, you said something that caught my attention, and that is that even if this does work, even if Trump, in his wildest dreams is able to be successful here and we repatriate a lot of the industries or jobs, it's still going to be more expensive because of the cost of labor in the United States versus the cost of labor in China. I mean, there's a reason that a global economy works in some instances. It's because if Americans are going to buy an iPhone and they want it to be $800 and not $2,500, then you kind of do rely on labor in other countries that is going to be less expensive. That's just the reality of the situation.
Right. I mean, let's just look at the automotive industry. So they slapped 25% tariffs on all imported cars. Let's say, okay, over 6 months or a year or 2 years, that leads GM or Ford or other American companies to bring back manufacturing to factories that are not working at full capacity or ones that had closed. Your point is exactly right. Cars made in those factories are going to cost more because there are higher labor costs, which maybe will bring some jobs back to places like Detroit. My fear is that a lot of the manufacturing will get done by automation and robots, and that really won't create job growth. but the average consumer is going to pay 10, 11, 12% more for those cars.
To that exact point, I want to throw to a clip from your really good friend Jesse Waters, who was speaking to Howard Lutnick.
Nice.
Now, we're not going to have all factories come back. Like clothing manufacturing, that's tough to bring back. But what kind of manufacturing are you talking about returning here?
Well, you can't just give that away. See, what's going to happen is robotics are going to replace the cheap labor that we've seen all across the world. I mean, think of what our factories did. They went to the cheapest labor in the whole world, slave labor, cheap labor, the worst environmental conditions, polluting the heck out of it. And then we bring back those cheap products here and we feel good about ourselves because we don't see the pain.
So help me understand, because this is basically Howard Lutnick saying that we have to do this, we have to be patriotic to bring these jobs back to the United States. But once they get back to the United States, we're going to replace them with robots?
I cannot believe he said that out loud. What is he talking about? Who does this help?
Well, if you can't believe he said that out loud, did you hear what he had to say about beef?
No, I'd love to hear that too.
Let's throw to the clip.
I mean, the European Union won't take chicken from America. They hate our beef because our beef is beautiful and theirs is weak.
Tommy, your thoughts?
Some weak-ass beef. I didn't know that about European cows. There was a report in Politico the other day, Brian, that said everyone at the White House hates Howard Lutnick and thinks he's an idiot and that he will probably be pushed out soon.
Why might that be?
Now I'm starting to get it.
Is it? What's their beef with?
Where's the beef?
Where's the beef? Let me just ask you a question, because you were part of an administration that I feel like, look, America's first black president. I feel like if Obama did anything 1 inch left of center, one inch off kilter, he got completely decimated for it, right? He had to be perfect, and that's the standard. That's the standard for the first black presidents. The standard for really any Democrat.
Yep.
But to see something like that after coming from an administration where you did have to be careful, where the color of Barack Obama's suit was fodder for a national emergency as far as the right wing was concerned, how does it strike you that Howard Lutnick is being shutted out to just spew like
nonsense,
straight fucking bile?
It's infuriating, man. I mean, I can imagine if, when we were sitting in the White House, if we turned on Fox News and they were like, sure, the stock market is down 10% this week, but if you zoom out, things are not that bad. I'd be like, when did I drop acid?
If you zoom out over a 90-year period, things actually look pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about some of the things that Donald Trump is doing. Throwing the Associated Press out of the press pool. If Barack Obama had done something to diminish Fox News's access to our press pool, they would have lost their minds. Their hair would have been on fire. But, it's folded into the Fox News culture war. If Barack Obama was telling law firms that they had to, do $100 million in pro bono work for issues he cared about, he would be called a tyrant because it would be tyrannical.
But he was called a tyrant, by the way.
No, exactly.
He was called a tyrant because he issued executive orders that were fewer executive orders than all of his predecessors, many of whom were Republicans, including Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan.
So, look, this is the challenge with Trump. Like, he has a cult following. He has propaganda mouthpieces on Fox News and, across the internet. But I do think there's going to be some political gravity here with these economic challenges and pain people are going to feel because, I don't know, if everything costs twice as much all of a sudden, like, there's no spinning that.
But you know how quickly the news cycle moves. And the reality is that we are in April of 2025. Yeah. The next election is going to be, the next
forever
major election, midterms, is going to be in November of 2026. And so is this a scenario where, A, it doesn't matter what happens now because 5 minutes from now we're not going to remember what yesterday was like? Or is it B, that this is still important because it helps define an administration, and when you're able to do that, those kind of things last?
I think that it really matters because if Trump's approval rating starts to take a hit, vulnerable members of Congress will notice that. That will make them fearful of the midterms and change how they vote in the interim. And they've got some really big budgetary things they want to get done. They have a tiny margin in the House of Representatives. And, if Trump's trying to jam through a $4.5 trillion tax cut for the richest people on the planet, paid for by cuts to Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security, you want vulnerable members, vulnerable Republicans thinking this is a death sentence for me politically and not more worried about getting primaried from the right.
This is, I think to the second point that I had made previously, I think it's going to be important too because Republicans are really good at repeating their attacks and defining Democrats before Democrats have a chance to define themselves.
Yeah.
And we did hear the fact that that Joe Biden was, in the throes of cognitive decline for years. Unfortunately, it kind of bared itself out, at the latter half of his presidency. But that was really the recurring theme throughout the entirety of his presidency, because they leaned in on this attack, defined him early, and just hit this over and over and over again. And look, I think I speak for a lot of people, but certainly myself, in saying that the Joe Biden that we saw at that debate was not the Joe Biden that, for example, I sat down with in February of 2022. Mm-hmm. But Republicans still understand the importance of being able to define these figures early and often. And I think that the Trump administration coming in right now and us being able to show and to repeat over and over and over again that, in fact, while they frame themselves as these responsible stewards of the economy, that they're in fact causing all of this chaos and dysfunction and crashing the economy, just like, by the way, Trump did in his first term, just like, by the way, George W. Bush did when he was president, just like, by the way, George H.W. Bush did when he was president. That is, I think, going to be a potent line of attack as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with Trump has always been he's one of the most famous people in the world. He had this image as a great businessman that was kind of manufactured by a book he had ghostwritten and by The Apprentice, right, an NBC show. And so he rode that for a long time. He had 4 years in the White House that ended objectively terribly. We all remember January 6th and how badly he handled the pandemic. But over time, people looked back at that period with rose-colored glasses because the economy was doing better. And I think we have an opportunity now to define this administration as incompetent. Incompetent on the economy, incompetent on national security, because Mike Waltz and the national security team are planning bombing runs in Yemen on signal, right? And I think we just got
eggplants emoji, emoji.
I mean, these are clowns. And you have Elon Musk, who bought his job with a $250 million check during the campaign, is now rampaging through the government, deciding which programs exist and who gets fired. Nobody voted for that.
But to that exact point, I mean, Trump left office with probably one of the worst economic environments in modern American history. At a 2.5% contraction of the economy, the unemployment rate was at 6.3%. Yeah. He had lost 2.9 million jobs. And people still do think back to the first Trump term, right, with rose-colored glasses. And so do we risk being in a scenario where the same thing happens, where we are watching the stock market crash in real time and all of our trading partners alienate us around the world, and yet there is just such a massive disconnect between Earth One, where we all live, and what the Trump cult thinks about dear leader, that this might be a thing where it doesn't even stick, in very much the same way that people think that Trump presided over some gangbusters economy, when again, it was the worst economy that we'd had since, the Great Depression.
Yeah, look, there's risk. And also, we just don't know what could happen. There could be some exigent event that completely changes the conversation, that redefines our political reality, a terrorist attack, a natural disaster,
right,
God help us, right? Though, with respect to the economy in Trump's first term, I think most voters understand that the pandemic was this once-in-a-lifetime thing, and that is why the economy crashed, people got laid off, the economy contracted, the stock market went down, right? They didn't really blame him for that.
Yeah, they gave him a pass for that.
Right, in this case, he is crushing the U.S. economy by choice.
Right.
And there's no hiding that.
That's the perfect point. I mean, this is the first recession that we will enter into that is both unilateral and completely voluntary.
Right.
And it's coming off the heels of a gangbusters economy that we were in that was inherited by Joe Biden. I mean, we had God knows how many months of job growth and hundreds of thousands of jobs added on a monthly basis, around 4% unemployment, which is roughly at a 50-year low, and a record high stock market, and took all of those things and kind of threw them away because he decided that he wanted to feed his ego and try and show everybody that he's a tough guy.
Right.
And I think the most ironic part of all of this is he was so certain that every other world leader would capitulate because he has such a distorted perception of how the people around him act, because he is surrounded by the most groveling, sycophantic, obsequious hangers-on with their mouths latched onto his ass. And so that really screws with how somebody perceives the people around them. And then he comes across people like Emmanuel Macron and Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, and they're like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, I mean, One thing Trump has done is reawaken nationalism in a lot of countries where we hadn't seen it in a while. Like, the Canadians are furious, and they should be. I mean, he's joking about annexing the country. He's literally trying to crush their economy through tariffs. So these people hate him. And the political incentives for someone like Mark Carney are to fight Trump tooth and nail, to not cut a deal, to look tough. And so, like, I think...
And by the way, he is almost single-handedly rescuing the Liberal Party in Canada.
He has, absolutely. Trudeau was dead in the water. People thought the Conservatives were going to win by 10 or 20 points, and now it's a dead heat. And I do think, look, the other opportunity here for us is, despite all of Trump's inroads with blue-collar workers and his man of the people bullshit, the guy has like 13 billionaires in his cabinet. He spends his weekends at his private golf club. Like, right now, I think he is at a Saudi-run live golf event at his club instead of attending a dignified transfer ceremony for 4 U.S. service members who were killed overseas in Lithuania in a training accident. Like, it's moments like that that tell us who this guy is, and those are the ones we have to uplift and make sure that voters who don't pay attention to politics actually see them.
Yeah, the Afghanistan withdrawal crowd is awfully quiet today.
They are.
Tommy, thank you for joining me. Everybody who is watching right now, please support independent progressive media. Subscribe to Pod Save America's YouTube channel. I'll put the link right here on the screen, also in the post description of this video. Tommy, thanks again.
Great to see you, buddy.